This episode is brought to you by my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program. If you're listening in real time, registration for my January 2018 groups is now open. To reserve your spot today, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode 166. Welcome to the 166th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. As usual, I'm excited to share today's episode with you for a couple of reasons. Today's guest is Rebecca Coomes, and for those of you who are not familiar with Rebecca, she has her own podcast, the Healthy Gut Podcast, and she recently released a cookbook. So she actually has a number of cookbooks on SIBO in particular. So in today's episode, we're talking about SIBO. So for those of you who've never heard of that before, aren't too familiar with it, SIBO is the acronym for Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth. And so essentially what we're talking about today is gut health and how it can relate to your fertility. Another reason why it's exciting to have Rebecca on the show is because Rebecca was actually part of my 10-week group program last year. Rebecca and I had the opportunity to get to know each other over the 10-week program. Rebecca joined the group so that she could gain a better understanding of her cycles and to gain confidence in using the method for birth control. And so it was really great to have her in the group and to have that opportunity just to share the fertility awareness side with her. But it was also great to have her in the group so that she could share her knowledge about SIBO and gut health and nutrition. And so that was a really great mix for us to be in that group together. And it was also a lot of fun to be able to interview Rebecca because, of course, some of the questions that I'm asking here in the podcast interview wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk about in our group sessions. And so for those of you who are looking to learn fertility awareness, to gain confidence using the method for birth control, or if you're transitioning from hormonal birth control and you're wanting to be really comfortable and confident knowing that you can use this method and, not get pregnant if you're not ready to get pregnant yet. Or on the flip side, if you are trying to conceive or planning to conceive in the future, wanting to really optimize your cycle and also gain a better understanding of what's happening in your cycle and how that could relate to your health. I just want to let you know that the registration for my group program, the 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program, is now open. And our next round of groups will be starting in January. And I will be securing and finalizing registration for these groups in the month of November and December. And the registration will be closing in December so that we can be all set and ready to go to start in the new year. And so if you'd like to be part of the next round of groups, I would like to invite you to apply. So you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. And you can apply right from that page. And so if you're thinking about it, I would invite you to go ahead and apply as soon as you can so that there's still space for you, because there's only a limited number of women that I can actually take in a group. So once the spots fill up, then we'll have to put you on the waiting list for the next group. And so again, that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now let's jump into today's interview. And today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Rebecca Coomes, to the show. Rebecca is an author, entrepreneur, passionate foodie, and intrepid traveler. She transformed her health after a lifetime of chronic illness, and today she guides others on their own path to wellness. She is the founder of The Healthy Gut, a platform where people can learn about gut health and how important it is for a healthy mind and body. She coaches SIBO patients on how to live well with SIBO through her SIBO coaching program. Rebecca is the author of the world's first cookbook for people treating small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. And she's also the host of the Healthy Gut Podcast and the SIBO cooking show. So I'm super excited to have Rebecca on the show today to talk about SIBO and her own personal experience with SIBO. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Hi, Lisa. It's so great to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And so for the audience, Rebecca and I know each other quite well because Rebecca was actually in my last group program. So this is great. It's like an extension of the group program. We still get to chat.
I know. It's wonderful. And I've been a long-time listener of your podcast, and I've just absolutely adored it, which is how I discovered your coaching program. And so it's really lovely to actually be coming on as a guest on your program today after listening for such a long time.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And so, you just came back. So obviously the listeners are going to hear your accent. And so you live in Australia.
I do.
And you just came back from like a whirlwind round trip across the states. So maybe you can share a little bit with us about that, because that was around the launch of your new book.
It was super exciting to head to the States and Canada for a month to launch the North American edition of my SIBO cookbooks. And these are the world's first cookbooks for people treating small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what's really exciting about it is that I'm now, really solving a problem for people with digestive issues, which is, what do I cook? And given that SIBO equates to about 60% of the underlying cause of why people have irritable bowel syndrome, that's a huge number of people that have IBS who have been told that they don't necessarily have a cure. Now they do, and it's this condition called SIBO, which I'm sure I'll talk more about. And when I got my diagnosis with SIBO, the first thing I said to my naturopath was, well, where are the cookbooks? You've just told me I need to eat a different diet. Where are the recipes? What do I eat? And she said they don't exist. So I got busy in the kitchen. I'm a passionate cook. And in 12 months, I released 3 cookbooks, which, talk about doing working for your sins. I have been a very, very busy woman, but it was just a life dream, really, to launch the books in the States and Canada, and to be able to come over and tour around the country and meet so many people that listen to my podcast and have digestive issues themselves, and to have these new cookbooks available in the States and Canada is just so exciting. So I had a great time coming out.
Well, I love that. I mean, for me, I'm kind of this like cerebral person, and so I know you do this also, but I always think of things in terms of, like, I want to know the research, I want to know the information and give people the information. But what I love about, you taking it upon yourself to make the SIBO cookbook is that this is actually what's going to make the impact, because you could talk about all of the scientific research all day, and it is very helpful and important, and we will get to it. But at the end of the day, you still have to make meals. And so, yeah, I love the practicality of this, and it's really going to help a lot of people. So before we jump into SIBO, I really want to talk about that in depth, but I would like for you, to share a little bit about your personal connection to it. So, before the cookbooks, before the Healthy Gut, before your podcast, what brought you into this world? What was your personal experience with SIBO?
Well, I have been a chronically unwell person my whole life. I was born 2 months premature, and I joke these days that, I'm really impatient and I'm always racing ahead at my next future goal. And my birth was no different. I had decided that 7 months in utero was plenty of time for me, and out I came. And I was a really sick kid. So, in the humidity crib at hospital, I'm being fed formula, which was dairy based. I was really reactive to the dairy. So I was a really colicky, sick little preemie baby. So cue plenty of antibiotics. As a younger child, I had quite a lot of food sensitivities, and I remember feeling quite sick and saying to my mum, "Mummy, I feel really yucky." And she'd say, "Well, what do you mean by yucky?" And I'd say, "I don't know, my tummy feels yucky." And I have memories going back to probably 3 or 4 where I distinctly remember feeling like that. And so as I went into my teens, I hit puberty quite young. I hit it at 11. I had terrible acne, extreme acne that covered my face, neck, chest, arms, and all over my back. I just felt like a complete leper. And I also had terrible, terrible periods. And I, in my 20s, was diagnosed with endometriosis. But in my from the age of 11 onwards, I had no idea what that was. And then by the time I got into my 20s, not only did I finally discover that I had endometriosis, but I was becoming more intolerant to food. So it started off with dairy, then it was wheat, and then gluten, and then legumes and pulses and beans and lentils and those types of things became quite problematic. And then my beloved red wine and white wine were causing a lot of problems. And I felt as I headed into my 30s that my list of foods that I could eat were just shrinking by the second. And I was self-restricting. So I was cutting foods out because they just didn't make me feel good. And alongside this, I was going to the doctor. I lived in the UK for 7 years, and I'm Australian, from Melbourne. And so I was going backwards and forwards to doctors saying, why do I feel so sick? I get every cold and flu and virus and bug going around. Someone can sneeze in the next suburb and I will pick it up. No, surely this is not how I'm supposed to live. And I'd been pumped full of antibiotics my whole life with my acne. They had put me on, months of antibiotics in the attempt to try and clear that up. And, my poor little system was just ravaged. And I would say that I actively looked for solutions for 10 years. And it was coming into the end of my time in the UK, and then once I returned to Australia. And one night, out of complete and utter desperation, I was, doing the old Google search, and that's always quite dangerous because every search leads to cancer when you're looking for answers to your health. But a naturopath here in Melbourne kept popping up. And I looked at where she was, and I was really happy to see that she was only about a 10-minute drive away from where I was working at the time. And I went into her clinic and I sat down, burst into tears, and she said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "I just don't know. I don't know what is wrong with me, but I just feel sick." And I've been to many doctors, all of whom have either told me I've got irritable bowel syndrome and there's nothing they can do about it and they don't know what causes it and just, here you go, deal with it. Or I'd had doctors say to me after running many blood tests, "You're in perfect health. There is nothing wrong with you. Perhaps this is psychosomatic and you're imagining this. You're just a stressed out, crazy woman," kind of message. And no one believed me. And, I'd get this huge, terrible bloating, which made me look pregnant. And it wasn't pregnancy. It was just, I was full of gas, and people were saying that was normal. And I fundamentally knew that it wasn't normal, but I just didn't know who could help me. Anyway, this naturopath said, the first words she said out of her mouth were, "I believe you." And those words have been some of the most powerful words anybody has said to me in my life, because feeling like somebody actually believes you when you say you feel sick gives you the power to actually feel like you can keep going. And then, we realized that I was incredibly deficient and depleted in all of my vitamins and minerals. And we did a whole range of tests on thyroid and my fasting glucose and all the rest. And once we'd ruled out some major things like type 2 diabetes and Hashimoto's or thyroid issues, she said to me, "I feel that you might have this condition called SIBO." And we tested for it. It came positive. And finally, for the first time in my life, I actually had an answer as to why I had felt so sick. I was 36 when that happened. So I have been a sick person for 36 years, which is a really, really long time. I'm 39 now, so I've only had 3 years of really good health across my life, 3 steady, consistent years of good health. So I tell you what, I love every day now because I wake up and I feel amazing.
Wow. Your story is so powerful, Rebecca. As you were talking, it was like, there were so many just insults to your poor system over all these years. And even from birth. Yeah, I feel like I just needed a moment to sit with that because it's so powerful. And I can't imagine what it would have felt like for you to actually be sick for all of those years. In retrospect, like, were you kind of used to feeling that way in a sense? Like, it's kind of a bad question, but I guess what I'm getting at is when you started to feel good, what was that like? Did you know you could feel that good?
No, because my normal was what it had been. And I didn't actually realize just how sick I felt until I stopped feeling like that. And it was so profound that I remember there was one very clear day as I was coming into the 2-month mark of my SIBO treatment, and it was literally like a veil lifted off me. I could think clearer. I felt like that movie, I can't think of, is it Inception, where they take a little pill and suddenly the whole mind is open and you didn't realize the power you had within your brain. That's how I felt. I felt like my brain could process things quicker. I could think more strategically and deeper. And now at this point in time, I'd quit my job and this was my whole quest to transform my health. And I'd started working for myself as a marketing consultant. So being able to think deeply and strategically is a really key thing for me. And I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, I'm like the movie. I feel like I just it's like I've got the elixir to life. And I had so much energy that I didn't need to sleep as much because I was literally brimming with energy, and energy I had never felt because I'd always been exhausted. But I just didn't know how exhausted I felt because that was my everyday normal. And, along with all of the medications that I took, I feel horrified to think how many pills and potions I've popped over the years. But I was also eating the classic American/Australian diet: high grain, high carbohydrate, minimal protein, extremely low fat, because I was a child of the 70s and the 80s. And I believed that mantra, fat is bad. So I wasn't fueling my body right. I was then destroying it with all of these medications. But that's what we believed was the right thing to do. So I didn't know that it wasn't helping me. It was completely hindering my ability to actually return to health.
Mm-hmm. I love the analogy of that movie. I think it's Limitless. I just love that because he took it and all of a sudden everything's clear. And then,
yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like at this point, maybe we could talk a little bit about SIBO, and I'm sure we'll kind of dial back to your story, but it's truly incredible. And I feel like once you kind of even just begin to understand kind of the depths of what you've been through, it makes perfect sense why you've taken this direction and really focused on helping other people to find the same healing that you have.
Totally, because I realized that if I could feel this much better as a chronically unwell person, what could the average person feel like if they didn't have so many years of sickness under their belt? And I became almost a little obsessed, well, let's say a lot obsessed, about trying to spread the message. I became almost evangelical about it because I was thinking, nobody knows this stuff. Why are we not talking about this? Why are our doctors not talking about this? Why are we not educating our children about this in schools? Why is everybody living in this awful haze of sort of just low-level chronic yuckness? We don't have to live like this. If I can change, anybody can change. And that's why I started doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I don't know why I feel so speechless, but I think maybe it's because we do have a bit of a relationship, and we were in our group together. And of course, I knew parts of your story, but to hear you describe it, I feel like there's something about that that's very powerful. That only comes out in interview style. It's one of the privilege, and I'm sure you found this too because you're a podcaster, but there's something about interviewing a person and asking questions where you actually get just a completely different perspective on their story, even if you've heard it before or parts of it. So thank you so much for sharing. That's why I love podcasting. That. Yes, it's incredible. So what is SIBO? And in your case, how was it diagnosed? But in general as well, how would one know if they had it, or how would one go about finding out if they might be affected by it?
Sure. SIBO is incredibly common, but it's just not very well known. So, as I said earlier, it is the largest underlying cause of irritable bowel syndrome. And they've studied people that have been clinically diagnosed with IBS, and they've then gone and tested them for SIBO. And anywhere from about 60 to 80% of the population will come back positive for SIBO. So the specialists will say on average 60% of people with IBS have SIBO as the underlying cause of why they have these digestive symptoms. So I'll talk a bit about the kind of digestive symptoms that people will experience in general with SIBO, and then I'll talk about what it is. So people that experience things like bloating, abdominal pain and cramping, constipation or diarrhea, or you swing between being constipated or just finding that you're, and I'll talk about constipation because I was chronically constipated, but I didn't know I was because, again, it was my normal. So constipation is where you're not opening your bowels every day, or you're not getting the sense that you are completely opening your bowels. Now, I used to go to the toilet maybe twice a week, maybe. If a good week might be 3 times a week. A bad week might be once a week or not even at all. I used to think it was great. It was time saving. I didn't need to worry about going and doing a poo in the toilet because I had too many other things to do. But that's not healthy because all of the food that we're eating is not passing through, and it's sitting in our intestinal system, and it's fermenting, and it's causing more problems. But many people that I speak to these days say, I didn't know I was constipated because I've always not gone to the toilet every day. So if you're listening to this and you think, that's me, I don't go to the toilet every day, then that could be considered a sign of constipation. Other things that can occur with SIBO will be food intolerances, and generally an ever-growing amount of food intolerances. So like with my experience, where it started out with dairy, and then it was gluten, and then it was wheat and then gluten, and then legumes. If you find as you've got older that you're thinking, I used to be able to eat X, Y, and Z, and now I can't eat it at all, then that's a really classic symptom of SIBO occurring. Other conditions or other symptoms that you might feel would be heartburn or that acid reflux feeling. You might get headaches or joint pain. You might have skin rashes or hives or eczema appear on your skin. You might also have muscle stiffness. That feeling that your brain doesn't feel like it's really working properly can be a sign of SIBO. And also just quite feeling quite fatigued. If you go through, and this doesn't necessarily mean it's only SIBO because it can also be your food, but if you get to 3 o'clock and you just absolutely crash, that can be a sign that you have SIBO. So, and then there's other conditions, things like rosacea. Anyone that has less restless leg syndrome has a much higher chance of having SIBO than those that don't. If you have an iron or B12 deficiency, then you're more likely to have SIBO. Even if you have respiratory symptoms, things like asthma, then that can also be related to SIBO. And really interestingly, things like anxiety and depression and autism can be linked to SIBO. Oh, and something I've forgotten to say, but this is really common, is belching and flatulence. So if you find that you're feeling really gassy and it's coming out as a burp or a fart, and if you've got really stinky farts, that can be a type of SIBO as well. And some people have nausea. So there's that kind of whole range of symptoms that quite often get lumped in with irritable bowel syndrome. So SIBO in and of itself is literally, so the acronym SIBO just stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So that means our small intestine, which isn't designed to have a large number of bacteria living in it, is now having to deal with bacteria that have been misplaced. And this bacteria is normal bacteria that lives within inside of us. And it's generally bacteria that should be living in your large intestine or the large colon or bowel, whatever you call it. That part of our intestinal system is designed to have a lot of bacteria because the job of the bacteria there is to finish fermenting and processing and digesting our food, whatever is remaining of the food as it's come into the large intestine before it goes out the rectum as a poop. So this bacteria finds its way in the small intestine and then it starts doing its job, which is eating and fermenting our food. That causes gas. And SIBO, the SIBO bugs will create hydrogen and or methane. So some people can have both gases being produced. Some people might only have one. But that gas then has to go somewhere. And because the small intestine isn't designed to have all of this gas being produced in it, it can get very painful, which is why we get those quite strong stomach cramps and why we bloat, because it's literally filling our small intestine, which I always think is funny. It's called the small intestine because it's actually a very long, if you laid it out, it goes for meters and meters. And so I always used to think, why do they call it small? It's not small, it's really big. But the small intestine then can become full of this gas and it can get trapped, which can be very painful and very uncomfortable. And it then will get released as a burp or a fart coming out the other end. So to test for SIBO is incredibly simple. It's done through a breath test most commonly, and you do a preparatory diet where you eat a certain very narrow spectrum of foods for a day before, then you fast overnight, and then you take a breath test, which you can do at home, which is wonderful. You don't have to go anywhere to do it. You can do it at home, or you can go into a doctor's clinic if you'd feel more comfortable doing it there. You take an initial sample of your breaths, and that's called the baseline reading. Then you drink a sugar solution, because sugar is one of the most easily consumed substances for this bacteria. So they have a wonderful time, they have a party, and they're off fermenting and digesting it, and they're producing gas if you've got the bacteria living in your small intestine. And then you breathe into this tube every 20 minutes, generally for 3 hours, and you send away your these little vials of your breath, which is strange because you can't see anything and you think, did I really get my breath in that little tube? And then the test results come back, and depending on what is present will determine whether you have SIBO or not. And so that is sort of SIBO in a nutshell. And the estimation when it comes to how many people have it is, in the States, it's estimated that 100 million Americans have SIBO, yet only a tiny fraction of those people actually know about it. And sadly, not many doctors know about it. It's growing in awareness, but still pretty unknown. In Australia, our population is much smaller. We're only about 24 million people. So it's estimated about 5 million Australians have it. But it works out generally to be about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of the population are expected to have it. It's about the same in the UK. And it definitely seems to be more of a common illness in the Western world, where we've been exposed to a lot more of these processed foods and antibiotics and, really impacting our bodies with these, quite heavy lifestyle changes to perhaps more traditional cultures.
Well, and what causes it?
Well, it's recognised that SIBO occurs because there's either a structural issue, which means that the functioning of the intestinal system hasn't worked. It's being kind of constricted or altered in some way to stop it working properly, or it's a functional issue. So when it comes to a functional issue, there's this really cool thing called the migrating motor complex. And its job is to sweep through all of the food particles that are going through our small intestine. It's like a sweeper wave. It cleans up. It's like, you've had a big party and then people have left cans and food and all sorts of things lying around. And there's some person with a big old broom coming through and sweeping up. That is the body's natural mechanism to move along bacteria and food particles so that they don't stick around in the small intestine and become problematic. When that fails, that can allow this bacteria to occur. And one of the most common ways that fails is through food poisoning. So when we have a food poisoning incident, and I think this is pretty cool in the sense of what this food poisoning does, it recognizes that the small intestine is a really cool place to stay. It wants to hang out there. It's nice and cozy and comfortable and warm, and it gets all the food in the world that it wants. So it damages the nerve endings that are responsible for this migrating motor complex. And so that nerve system doesn't work as well. So the sweeper wave is like it's gone on vacation. It's just not present. For some people, it's not present at all, or for others, it's just only half working. So they're like doing half-time hours rather than full-time hours. And so the bacteria can then hang out. Now, we are ingesting and inhaling and having bacteria come into our bodies every second. They're coming in through our eyes, our nose, our mouth. They're on the food we eat. They're on our hands. We are constantly exposed to bacteria. And the first line of defense is our stomach. Our stomach is highly acidic, and that is designed to kill off a lot of that bacteria. But the bacteria that survive our stomach that then come into the small intestine, then the body's mechanism is to sweep it along onto its merry way, and then to get into the large intestine, where it's fine if they hang out there. That's not a problem. The other way that the bacteria can end up in the small intestine is it can come back up from the large intestine. We have valves at all of the key juncture points from our mouth through to our anus. And the system is designed to be a one-way street. We're not designed to have things go back up the one way. And between our small intestine and our large intestine is a valve called the ileocecal valve. And for some people with SIBO, this is damaged or it's not working properly. Now, this can occur because people have had surgery to the area. Anyone that has an inflammatory bowel disease is at much greater risk of having SIBO because their system is quite inflamed and quite often highly diseased. Some people might have had their ileocecal valve removed, which means that there is just this constant backflow of bacteria. For people like me, and I've just recently discovered this, I had my appendix rupture and I had to have an emergency appendectomy. Your appendix is really close to your ileocecal valve, and you can have scar tissue form around a site of surgery or inflammation or disease, and that can, in my case, it's kind of all constricted around my ileocecal valve. So that little valve, it's just not able to do its job properly. So we can have bacteria coming from upwards and it can be coming from downwards. And once it gets into the small intestine and it arrests the normal functioning of the small intestine, it then can become more and more problematic. And so some people might have had SIBO for some time, but in the early days, it was quite mild and the system was still managing to cope somewhat well with it. But as time has progressed, more and more bacteria is now hanging out in their small intestine. Their symptoms are worsening. The nervous system is even more damaged than it was before. And then it gets to a point where, quite often people will say, I just woke up or I ate this one meal and then everything went wrong. Or I went on vacation and I had this spicy meal and everything went wrong. And it's not that one thing has caused the whole system to fail. It's just like you've filled your cup to the brim and that one final piece was just the tipping point and the system has said, I'm done. I can't cope with this anymore. I'm off. I'm on vacation. You deal with it.
Well, and so when it comes to SIBO's a challenging condition in terms of treatment options. I've had a number of clients kind of struggle with, because often for SIBO, the diagnosis or the recommendation is to take some sort of antibiotic, whether it is a botanical antibiotic or whether it is a antibiotic. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the treatment options. We've talked about the diagnosis part, but once if you found a practitioner who's knowledgeable in this area, knowledgeable even enough to just ask the question, like, could it be SIBO, and do a test, and it comes back positive, what do you do now?
Well, a really key step is finding a practitioner that knows this condition intimately. Like you said, it is for 2/3 of the people diagnosed with SIBO, it's chronic, which means it does not resolve after a round of treatment. And for many people, they're dealing with this for years. So you want to be dealing with a practitioner that really knows their stuff. So there are 3 common treatment options that are used at this point in time. And I would dare say that as we continue to evolve our understanding of the bacteria living within us and also the system, the intestinal system itself, this will evolve as time goes on. SIBO has really only been treated in the medical world for about 7 or 8 years, so it's very early days. So you can take an antibiotic, and there's a really common one called rifaximin, which is generally not absorbed, which means it doesn't go anywhere else other than the small intestine. And this is a good thing because we don't want our other bacteria in the rest of our body to be affected by this. And for many people, this is the first choice because it's got generally you take a 1 or 2 week round of this antibiotic. And for some people, that is all they need to do. There are also herbal antibiotics, and these are based on botanicals, and they have just the same response as the pharmaceutical or man-made antibiotics, but they take longer. So for 1 week on an antibiotic, there's 2 weeks on a herbal antibiotic. And for many people, it's personal preference. I chose to do only the herbal route because I was so concerned at how many antibiotics I had taken that I didn't want to do another course. Although I have learned a lot more about this whole world, and I don't have the fear around that antibiotic that I once did. And then the third treatment type is a liquid diet, and that starves out the bacteria in a pretty extreme manner. You drink a solution. It's a pre-digested liquid formula which contains fats, sugars, amino acids, vitamins and minerals. And you can either make it yourself at home, which can taste pretty ordinary because you're using things like amino acids, which are really bitter and quite disgusting, or you can buy a formula made by one of the pharmaceutical companies. It's really up to personal preference. But it does mean for people that they do not eat a single thing for 2 or 3 weeks. And that can be a really kind of big mindset challenge to to make the decision, okay, I'm not going to eat anything for 2 to 3 weeks. So people will go through a round of treatment. Some people need to do multiple rounds of treatment, and then your practitioner will retest you to get a sense of what your numbers are doing, with the view that your numbers on your breath test would be reducing. But something that I see quite commonly now that I work with a lot of SIBO patients and generally working with people that have been sick for a very long time, is that when we do these treatments, it's literally just a topical solution. It's addressing the overgrowth of bacteria, but it is not addressing why the bacteria became overgrown in the first place. And until we address why the system failed, all we will do is stay on multiple rounds and multiple rounds of treatments. And for some people, it's very easy to identify how they got sick. There's a new blood test available in the States called the IBS check test. And that tests for whether you have the antibodies in your blood for a food poisoning incident. And then you can say, okay, well, yes, that exists. Then yes, my nervous system has been damaged, which supports the movement of the small intestine. Okay, I need to use some supplementation, and there's pharmaceutical ones or herbal ones that help stimulate those nerves and help support the migrating motor complex. It might be like someone like me who has discovered I've got adhesions in my abdominal cavity from having endometriosis and having my appendix removed. I've had several laser surgeries for my endo. My abdominal cavity is completely bound up with all of this scar tissue. So the structure of my small intestine is not correct because it's bound up. It's all kind of wrapped up like it's got all of this gauze around it. So the small intestine can't work properly. So it's really important that people get to the underlying cause of why this bacteria developed in the first place before they can truly recover from it. But it can be recovered from. So that's the good news. And even those people that don't fully recover from it, they can see an 80% improvement from where they've been. And I would say that I've got an 80% improvement from where I've been. And I tell you what, 80% is a hell of a lot better than where I was.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I'm really appreciative that you went into, the treatment options that are pretty standard, but also taking it even a level further to talk about how, those treatments, although effective, needing to be done over multiple rounds unless you really start to figure out why it happened in the first place. So that is really fascinating. And so one of the questions that I always ask, and maybe there are answers to it, but of course, one of the challenges, I'm sure the challenges of, the clients that you work with in your program, but also the challenge of any woman listening who has been diagnosed with SIBO or who is really resonating with everything you're saying and now has convinced herself that she, is like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've experienced. How do you go about finding a practitioner that will really support you and has a deep understanding of it to the point that not only will they do the testing and help you to identify and recommend a course of treatment, but also go that extra step to really help you identify the underlying cause?
Well, I'm happy for people to reach out and connect with me because I now have a relationship with almost all of the top SIBO doctors around the world. So I'm often referring people off to practitioners. The good thing about this is you don't necessarily need to see somebody face to face. You can do Skype consults. And that's what I often recommend to people, particularly where people come from states where naturopathic medicine is not legal. And I was so amazed to hear that about America, that, that some states it's illegal to be a naturopathic doctor, which blew my mind. So there are people in those states that just do not have the support at a local level. The other place to go to is there's an amazing doctor based in Portland, Oregon in the States called Dr. Alison Seebecker, and her website, siboinfo.com, is a wonderful resource. She's got it freely available for people. She's got a lot of information about what SIBO is. I don't believe that she's taking patients on at the moment, but she's also a great place to start. And there is, I have heard on the grapevine that a fellow SIBO patient is actually currently building an international directory of SIBO practitioners. I'll be linking that on my website, thehealthygut.co. So if, people are wanting to look for that, then that will be on my website as well. But the key is definitely finding somebody. Another thing you can do, and again, this is on my website, but you can also go to SIBOtest.com, and that's run by Australia's leading SIBO specialist, Dr. Narala Jacobi, and she's the woman that developed the diet protocol, which I base my books on and I followed myself. But she has a quiz that you can take. It's totally free to do, and you answer, I think it's about 10 to 15 questions, and it gives you the likelihood of you having SIBO. And I did that when I first heard about SIBO. I went and did the quiz, and then I went and did the breath test. Now, my result was highly likely that I had SIBO, and I have since sent many people to do that quiz. And then those that go off and do the breath test, if the test has said that it's likely that they have SIBO, and it is a sliding scale of likelihood of SIBO, when it is likely or highly likely or extremely likely, and they go and do the breath test, I haven't had anybody come back to me and say that the breath test was negative. So that quiz is a really good starting point just to get a sense of whether it's likely you have the condition or not. There's also some other diseases that if you have this, that it is more likely that you have SIBO. And I mentioned some before, but anyone that has been told that they've got irritable bowel syndrome naturally should go and get checked for SIBO. If you've got celiac disease, if you've had chronic fatigue syndrome, if you've got fibromyalgia, if you've got any inflammatory bowel disease such as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, if you've experienced restless leg syndrome, if you've had acne rosacea or hyper or hypothyroidism or scleroderma, diverticulitis or diabetes, any woman that has endometriosis, those conditions give you a greater chance of developing SIBO. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that's me, I've got one of those conditions, definitely getting checked out. And what's really interesting is I've interviewed people, doctors who specialize in the inflammatory bowel disease world. And when they test their patients for SIBO, let's say they've come in with Crohn's and they're in a terrible state with their Crohn's, if they test and come back positive for SIBO, they will often treat the SIBO. That will make their Crohn's or support their Crohn's to be less problematic. And sometimes what these specialists find is that these patients, when they go into a flare, it's not actually their IBD, it's their SIBO flaring. And so when patients are like, my treatment's not working, my medication's not working, it can often be because it's actually not the disease flaring up, it's something else in the digestive system. And when they can get SIBO and their disease under control, they can see enormous improvement in their condition, which is really, really positive. So I'm really passionate about telling people about that because so many people that are dealing with an inflammatory bowel disease are not being told about SIBO, and they're getting sicker and sicker, and they don't necessarily need to.
That's fascinating. Well, and I would love for you to touch a little bit on the connection between SIBO and fertility. You know, I had Dr. Kalish on the show several episodes ago, so I can link that in the show notes. And he talked about his protocol with regards to fertility. And one of the main points of that was testing for gut infections. And one of the things that he said was that if you identify that there's some sort of gut infection and then you resolve it, he said, you know, alongside the other parts of his protocol, you know, he said basically the fertility kind of falls in line after that. And from a charting perspective, I can tell you that, and we spoke about this a lot in our group program together, Rebecca, but whenever I have a client who has IBS symptoms and has symptoms of gut dysbiosis, whether it's like constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel, all of those types of complaints, you can see it in the chart. And it isn't until we get some of that gut stuff under control that we actually see shifts and improvements in the charts. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, what I see, and I don't believe any study has actually been done, so I'm talking more about anecdotal observation rather than clinical studies. But women, there's a very large Facebook group for people with SIBO. It's currently over 20,000 people and growing rapidly every day. But there's a very strong correlation between women who have endometriosis and women who have SIBO. And so endo is obviously a reproductive disorder, and it's also an immune condition. And so if we think about what is happening to impact the immune system, which can also impact the hormone system and the endocrine system, is when we have SIBO, the gas that is produced by the bacteria and these little critters, as I call them, that is putting enormous pressure on the lining of the small intestine, and that is often causing it to become quite permeable or known as leaky gut. And so our immune system is then having to deal with food particles and matter that is coming through and passing through into our bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And it's triggering this huge inflammatory response. Our immune system is like, whoa, who are you? I'm attacking you. You're not supposed to be here. And that's why we often see that we're having a lot more issues with certain foods. So there's enormous amounts of inflammation occurring in the body, and that is very stressful. So we're releasing a lot of stress hormones to deal with it. So cortisol can often be a lot higher because, where the body's like, I am just under constant attack. So then if you think about it from a reproductive perspective, that is not putting the body into the most optimal state for health. And it's not surprising to me that often fertility can be compromised with people that have gut health issues because the whole system is just highly inflamed and just really stressing out. And so from a reproductive perspective, the body is thinking, this isn't really the right time for me to be bringing a new human into the world. Now, it's not to say that a woman with SIBO will not fall pregnant. There are plenty of women that do fall pregnant with SIBO, but we're not giving our body the best chance to fall pregnant. And so treatment of getting the bacteria numbers down initially to help calm that inflammation, and also modifying the diet. And we can touch a bit on, how you eat when you're dealing with SIBO, so that you can literally, it's like turning the dial down on dimmer lights, so that you're, instead of having the lights at full bore, which is, full inflammation, we're just slowly turning it down so that the body can calm down, get into better health. All of the hormones can calm down and that they're not so out of whack, and that we can be putting ourselves into a better state for reproductive health. People with SIBO are more likely to have issues with their adrenal glands and issues with their thyroid. Those three systems are very, very interlinked. And so when you've got this dysregulation in the body, that is having a big impact on our hormones as well. And, like I said, it's just not leaving us in a condition that is optimal for reproduction.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask you about is a lot of people resist medication. I think we touched on this a little bit, but when you're diagnosed with something like SIBO and then you're told that you have to go and take an antibiotic, you mentioned that just given your history of antibiotics, you didn't want to take it, which makes perfect sense. With SIBO, is it possible to heal just with food alone, just by making dietary changes?
At this point in time, it is believed that it isn't. I've interviewed many doctors and asked this very question, and they believe that diet alone cannot treat SIBO. However, diet is an incredibly important supportive function of dealing with SIBO, and it's also used to help calm down symptoms and to calm inflammation. But really, we've got to address, if we really truly want to address why SIBO developed, we've got to fix up the underlying causes of SIBO, and diet alone will not allow SIBO to occur. I often hear people say, I used to eat so many carbs, that's why I got SIBO. Eating carbohydrates in and of themselves is not obviously the best nutritional thing to do for a person, but that won't cause the system to fail. We have to address why the system failed. Why they use the antibiotics or herbal antibiotics is to give that initial relief from just the overgrowth of bacteria, so that we can, again, calm that inflammation down, calm that toxic response that's happening within the body with all of those toxins that the bacteria are releasing and the gases every day when we eat. And it's like turning that dimmer switch down and then going in and looking at what the core root of the problem is and addressing that. For some people, particularly people that have IBDs or those inflammatory bowel diseases, for some people that can't be fixed. It is what it is. So it's about management rather than a complete resolution of the condition. But that doesn't mean that you can't, have a really great quality life when you're still managing your condition.
Well, and as we come to the end of our interview, I feel like I could just ask you questions till the end of time, Rebecca. I think I always say that, but I've really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like just this conversation, the women who are listening to this episode, especially the ones who can really resonate and have had some of the symptoms that you've talked about, which is a lot of us, right? I feel like just this information alone, it's like the key. It's one of those things for in a person that does have SIBO, to have this identified and addressed is going to make a profound impact in their health and their life and their fertility. And so could you take us through what your periods were like? So you mentioned that you had endometriosis, and you mentioned that between, the age of 11 and until your 20s, when you were actually diagnosed, you actually knew what it was. You had no idea what it was. So what were your periods like during this time? And then what are they like now?
They were like hell on earth. So I was bedridden in excruciating agony pretty much from the moment that they started. And I had a 15-minute window to take painkillers when my period started. And that included if it started in the middle of the night. If I did not get really strong painkillers into my system within those 15 minutes, I would be completely destroyed for a good day, if not 2 days. My periods would go from anywhere from 7 to 10 days, and it was like Niagara Falls. It was horrific. Because I was so young when I first started them, I had no idea how to use tampons. I was a ballerina. I had to stop doing ballet because I could not dance with these, and this is back in the very late 80s, and those awful, huge, bulky pads. And I literally would have soaked the biggest pad within an hour to 2 hours, saturated soaking. So it was really debilitating, and it was embarrassing. I lived in fear of just having a carry moment where I'd just be terrified. I'd be covered in blood, and Mum would pack my bed with towels and bed protectors, and because nighttime was just the worst, I would end up covered in it. It was horrific. And it stayed like that all through into my 20s when I finally got the diagnosis of endo. And I was only diagnosed with endometriosis because I'd had an abnormal pap smear where I was at that final stage of precancerous cervix before it was considered cancer. So I'd had a laser treatment on my cervix for that. And then I had non-stop bleeding for 6 months and, just constant. So I'd have a period and then I'd be having some kind of bleed every single day, which sucked. That was really a really kind of frustrating time. And so finally, this isn't right. You shouldn't have been bleeding like this. And they did exploratory laparoscopy surgery and discovered that I had endoadhesions. That's how I was finally diagnosed. They put me onto hormone therapy. So I went on the Depo-Provera injection, which stopped my periods completely, which I thought was wonderful after the hell on earth that I'd experienced. And so I didn't have a period for a good 10 years, I would say. And then at my last laparoscopy surgery, my specialist in the UK suggested that I went on the Mirena coil, which she inserted after the surgery, and that was awful. I had every single side effect listed for that particular hormone therapy. Fast forward to today, I am a lot older, but I have been living a very natural life. So I came off all hormone contraceptions about three and a half years ago, something like that. I have been eating, I started off by changing my diet to a more paleo diet around about that time. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've either been doing SIBO treatment or I've been free from SIBO for 2 years now. And I have eaten a much more kind of whole foods, very natural diet. I will often have now after doing your program, Lisa, it isn't such a surprise, but now that I'm charting, but there would be days where my period would start and I'd be like, whoa, oh gosh, where did this come from? Because all of the PMS symptoms had gone. I do not need to take painkillers anymore. And that is such a big change for me. My period, I do have a day or two where it's still reasonably heavy, but it's not the carry episodes of past, which is great. I can actually live a life and not fear for what might happen. And it feels like a much more normal period. What I find very interesting is, I'm not perfect with my diet. Most people aren't. So if I have had a period, perhaps like when I'm traveling with my recent trip to the States and Canada, I ate way more processed food than I would normally eat, just by virtue of the fact that I was not at home cooking. I noticed then just the differences in my cycle, in my symptoms, my period. I just had a little bit more cramping than I normally would. And I kind of acknowledged to my body, yep, I get you. I hear you. I didn't treat you as well as I should have treated you this cycle. You're reminding me that you need really good quality food and nutrition and lifestyle support. And yeah, I'm listening. Thanks for the message. So my diet really does, and my lifestyle really do have a very significant impact on my cycle. But the fact that I have not had to have a laser surgery on my endo again, and that was one of my keys, that I did not want to go back in for another laser surgery. And by clearing up my SIBO and changing my diet and really significantly improving the state of my gut health, which I can also see in my immune system is now working finally. So my immune system is doing its job and it's not attacking me like it was. And so that's had a significant and profound impact on my endometriosis, which is wonderful.
Wow. You've been through so much. I have to, and you're so just strong. You're just amazing. You're really an inspiration to me and to everyone who's listening. And
thank you.
Well, you're welcome. But it's true. And it's just so horrible that you had to go through this, but so inspiring that you took something so devastatingly just awful and have really turned it into a beacon of light for anyone who is experiencing any of the symptoms that you have. I mean, you went through the ringer, but you've turned it into a way to help others, which is really inspiring. Yeah. To bring us to a close, I'd love for you to tell us a bit about your cookbook and also about the diet in a general sense. I know there's a lot to it, and we could have spent the whole episode talking about diet, but give us a sense of, in general, for the listeners that either have SIBO and know they have SIBO, so did the search in iTunes for SIBO and got this because they were just newly diagnosed with it, or think they may have it. How is the diet different? Like for you, how did you change from the standard Australian diet? Like, what does your diet look like now?
So the key thing with diet is that it's about helping calm down your symptoms. And if we think about why the symptoms occur, and this is because the bacteria are eating our food. So we want to reduce the foods that the bacteria love, and that is foods like carbohydrates and sugars, because they're very easily consumed by these little critters. And also things that ferment, so beans and legumes, pulses, anything that can hang around for a long time in the gut that is perfect fuel for the bacteria. So people find that they're eating a lot more protein and lower fermentable vegetables, and lower carbohydrate vegetables. So it's things like carrots and zucchini, pumpkin and squash. The salad ingredients like lettuce and cucumber and tomatoes, they're all generally pretty fine for people with SIBO. But the vegetables like potato can be quite problematic for people, and rice can cause a lot of inflammation and bloating. Naturally, you're going to take out the sugary foods and the processed foods because they're generally very highly refined carbohydrates and sugars, which are little power bombs for these bacteria. And you're moving to a whole food or real food diet. What was the biggest change for me was that I moved away from that high carbohydrate, medium protein, low fat, and I completely flipped it on its head. So I went to a much higher fat, good quality fats like animal fats and vegetable fats, fats from nuts and seeds and things like that. Still my moderate amount of protein, but I became really concerned about the kind of protein I ate, and I moved away from just any old protein to just being rigid in eating grass or pasture-fed protein that was free range, free from hormones, organic where possible. And then really keeping my carbohydrate intake quite low. I'm very sensitive to carbohydrates, and that I found that if I had something that was a higher carbohydrate food like rice or potatoes, and I was strictly gluten-free, it just gave me too many flares. I just ended up really bloated and looking like I was pregnant. And, no woman wants to have people congratulate them on their pregnancy in the street by a stranger when you're not pregnant. And I've had that happen many times from my SIBO belly. So as soon as I realized that by just avoiding some of these foods for a while, I could have a flatter tummy, I was all for it. And what I will say about the diet is it's temporary. This is not a lifelong diet. It is just a temporary diet while you're killing off the bacteria, reducing their numbers, healing your system, letting it calm down, healing the lining of your gut. Because ultimately, the doctors who are doing this treatment want you to be eating as broad a range of food as possible. So I ate this way for 6 months, and my biggest takeaway was that I changed my taste buds in the process. I used to have a really big sweet tooth, and now I find that I can taste the sweetness in vegetables that I never thought was sweet before. And I just don't have the desire to eat sugary sweet foods or highly carbohydrate foods like I once did. And so that's been a really positive outcome for me, that I just really enjoy eating really natural food. And when I get to experience eating the way I used to, like I did when I did my tour around the US and Canada, and eating all of that processed food and just lower quality food, I felt terrible from it. It was just my whole system was saying to me, "What are you doing, Rebecca? This is not good food." And I could not wait to get home. And the first meal I ate was just literally the biggest bowl of steamed vegetables with fat drizzled all over it. And I was so excited to be eating that food. It was like, all my Christmases had come at once.
Yeah.
So that's the diet in a nutshell. Some people follow a low FODMAP diet. Some people follow a biphasic diet, which is what I followed. There's several diet iterations out there for the SIBO person. The key thing is that you find what works for you, and all of these diets are just guides. They're not a solution in the sense that, every food listed on it is going to be suitable for you. So, and that can be frustrating because many people want to just be given, these are the instructions, this is what you do, this is going to be the outcome. But we are all completely unique from one another. So the foods that work for me won't necessarily be the foods that work for somebody else. And so it's really important that we take that ownership of our own health and we use the information that's available to us as guides, but that we become our little own private investigators. We work out what our bodies like and what they don't like. And what they don't like today won't be what they don't like tomorrow, because we're constantly evolving and changing and recovering. And so you'll find that you can introduce foods that you couldn't eat a month ago. And that's really exciting as your foods begin to increase. And for many people, they say, I'm eating more food now than I've eaten for the last 5 years because I felt so sick, but I didn't know what was causing the problem.
So then I remember you saying that you were at a point where the foods that you were eating were decreasing and there was just more and more things that you were sensitive to. Have you been able to reintroduce foods back into your diet now?
I have. And what's nice, although I don't eat it often, is that I can tolerate gluten and dairy. And so that makes traveling a lot easier. Now, when I'm cooking at home, I'm not cooking. I can tolerate butter and cheese, but I don't have any other dairy in my house. But when I'm traveling, I don't have to be that really rigid person that I used to find myself to. I just found myself annoying having to ask all those questions. What's in this and what are you cooking that in and blah, blah, blah. Whereas now I can eat with a lot more freedom, and that is really liberating. But I choose to eat a much more healthy whole food diet when I'm at home or where possible. When I'm traveling, but it's just nice. It's so nice to be able to not worry. And I was in Thailand at the beginning of the year for a holiday for a friend's wedding. And in the past, I would have worried so much about what I could and couldn't eat and what they were cooking with and what dishes would be suitable. But on this holiday, I just ate. I just enjoyed the food, and that was great.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. We've talked about so many different topics today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of give us a really in-depth understanding of SIBO. What is one thing you would want the listener to take away from our conversation today?
The one thing that I'm always talking about is that you are worth it. Your health is worth it. And now that I know what it feels like to feel good, keep going. If you feel like you don't have the right support team medically, keep looking for the practitioner that is right for you. I found mine finally. Took me some time to find her, but she's now a very integral part of my team. And, I really thank, her so much for everything she's done for me. And, just keep putting one foot in front of the other and looking for the solutions to your health puzzle, because you will really thank yourself in the future for starting to solve that puzzle today. And there is no day that is better or worse than the other to start. Just get going with it.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. Maybe you can share with us how the listeners can get in touch with you and grab a copy of your new cookbook.
Yes. So the best way is to head to my website, thehealthygut.co. That's .co. And then all of the information about my cookbooks are there, my coaching program, and also my podcast if anybody wants to learn more about SIBO. I delve into it deeply on the Healthy Gut podcast.
Awesome. Well, all of those links will be on the show notes page. Rebecca, it has been just so much fun having the opportunity to pick your brain. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show, Lisa. And I just love your podcast. So it's just an absolute honor to be on the show with you today.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/166. That's fertilityfriday.com/166. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Rebecca. She is so knowledgeable and, such an inspiration. To hear her story and to think about all of those years of chronic illness that she went through, it's incredible just to feel her enthusiasm and her zest for life, coming out on the other side, and not only coming out and being healthy, but really taking it and wanting to share that with others. It is really incredible to think that this is such a critical issue, such a critical part of IBS, with the research showing that 60 to 80% of people with IBS actually would be tested positive for SIBO. And to think that, many medical practitioners are not testing for it because they just don't know about it. It's just incredible to think. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, especially if you found the podcast because you were looking for information about SIBO and you stumbled across this. I really hope that you enjoyed it, because ultimately this information, it's not something that's available everywhere. Hopefully within the next couple of years. I don't know how long that would take, but we all can hope that at some point this will be mainstream and everyone will know about it. Because if you think about her story and everything that she went through, and especially in her story, the connection between her SIBO and endometriosis, due to the inflammation and all of the different symptoms contributing to each other, and the radical shift that she experienced in her symptoms. If that can happen, it's just like she said, if I can heal, if I can get better, then anyone can get better. And so I want to thank Rebecca again for being on the show. It was super fun to have Rebecca in our group. I always say I attract the sweetest, nicest women to me. So it was a real treat to have her in the group and also to have her on the show. And as I've talked about on the show, a number of times, it's really interesting the different ways that gut issues will show up in a woman's menstrual cycle chart. And so I've worked with clients where gut issues show up with abnormal cervical mucus patterns or different changes. And then based on different changes that, we go ahead and make in diet, lifestyle, different things that we identify, we see some of those changes shift and change, and in some cases clear up. And so it's incredible the wealth of information that you can gain from charting your cycle and the different insights you can get into your health, your body, your immune system health, your gut health, your food sensitivities if you're sensitive to certain foods. It's incredible how much information you can actually glean from your cycles. So if you're looking to gain more information and more confidence in using the fertility awareness method, whether you're wanting to use it as a birth control method or whether you're wanting to gain a deeper understanding of what your cycle is reflecting back to you about your overall health, or you're just wanting some more insight into what's happening in your cycle, I would encourage you to head over to fertilityfriday.com/work with me and take a look at the different programs that I have available. So, as I mentioned, the group program, my 10-week fertility awareness mastery program, registration is now open for that. And that's a program that I only run about 2 to 3 times a year. So registration for that is open now, and the group is going to be starting in January. So if you're wanting to jump in and be part of that group, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program and get in your application as soon as you can, so that we make sure that we have space for you. So there's a limited number of women that I can accept into the group. And if you'd like to be part of that, make sure to apply as soon as you can. Don't wait till the last minute. Just want to make sure that there's enough space for all the women who want to be part of it. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to the episode today, to continue supporting the Fertility Friday community, and also for sharing the show. I know a lot of you are talking about the show and sharing it with your friends and spreading the word about fertility awareness and body literacy. And ultimately, that's the message. We want more women to know how their bodies work. And we want more women to know the relationship between their menstrual cycles and their overall health. So I really appreciate you for being a part of that. So thanks again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.